Hi girls, it is Thursday, September 13th, and we're going to be talking about alcoholism in our relationship, in our marriage. I'm not an expert on alcoholism, but I lived through it for 15, 16 years. I attended Al-Anon weekly for about 2 years, and I've read as many books as I could get my hands on to try to figure this out. One of the main things I learned about alcoholism is that it's just one of those really crazy, insidious sin, disease kinds of things, and there almost is no figuring it out. But I'll share with you the things that I did learn from my experience. I could talk about this for hours. No one would want that. So I'm going to try to briefly share my my story, just bits and pieces. My first awareness that alcohol was an issue in our marriage was when my daughter was 6 weeks old. We were at a family gathering for Christmas, and I was pulled aside at the end by my brother-in-law, who told me that I needed to drive home because he felt that my husband was intoxicated. I hadn't even been paying attention, and I didn't even realize that he had been drinking through the night. But that broke my heart, that I felt like he wasn't protecting us and taking care of us, especially because it was winter. We had over an hour to drive. I was terrified. So I just started noticing things. I was watching a movie one time. Our kids were probably toddlers. The movie was When a Man Loves a Woman with Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia, and she plays an alcoholic wife, and she hid bottles of alcohol throughout her house. And I remember thinking, oh, well, we have that bottle of vodka up in that cabinet above our fridge, but it's been there like since we moved in. And then I thought, or has it? So I marked it, like where it was on the bottle, and I thought I'll just check it in a couple days. I'm sure it's nothing. When I went to check it, like 3 or so days later, 3/4 of the bottle was gone, and I didn't know what to do with that information. We were just a couple of clean-cut Christian kids. Not that that is a guarantee, but alcohol was not a part of our dating relationship. It was just, I didn't know what to do with this information. So once I confronted him, we went through cycles. I would find something, a bottle or something, or one time I was coughing, and I reached for his water, took a big gulp, and it was vodka. So we would go through these cycles of, I'd find something, I'd confront him, I'd give him a new rule, like no more drinking in our house, or okay, you can drink, I just never want to see it, or okay, you can only drink when you're at your parents', but if you are going to drink, then you need to not drive home that night, you need to spend the night, or if you don't talk to so-and-so about drinking, or if you don't stop drinking, I'm going to tell such and such at church. And it just perpetuated. Then I'd catch him, or one time I stepped on a beer bottle cap in the shower. One time he smashed through a mailbox, just shattering the windshield of the car. One time I found a receipt, and it was time and date stamped when he was supposed to be somewhere else. The irony was he had told me he was going to an AA meeting, which he did a little bit on and off, but instead he had gone to buy vodka. So I'd catch him, confront him, he'd stop for a couple months, he'd start up again for several months, get caught, and this went on for 12 to 15 years. And it was crazy, especially because in my situation, he hid it. I have not seen my husband with a drink in his hand in over 15 years. So to have to try to figure out when he's drinking, especially when he would look me in the eye. There was one time that he had just poured a drink. I could see behind him the bottle of vodka, and I said, "Are you drinking again?" And he said no. So with it in his hand, and he would still lie to me. So it was very confusing, crazy making. And I finally got to a point where a counselor just said, I really, really think you should consider Al-Anon. I didn't want to go because I thought I wasn't one of those kinds of people. I thought an alcoholic was someone who got in car accidents, had DUIs, couldn't keep a job, beat their wives, came in, drunk in the middle of the night or whatever. That was not our situation at all. My husband would just kind of fade throughout the day, and he would become nicer, which is kind of scary and sad. But I dragged myself to Al-Anon 3 or 4 years ago, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I'm going to read off 20 questions that they have on their website to help you determine if alcohol is an actual problem in the life of someone that you care about. So just listen for these. Lord, I just ask right now that you will soften the hearts of the women who are listening. And if this is an issue, Lord, that you would just nudge their hearts so that they know. Do you worry about how much someone drinks? Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking? Do you tell lies to cover up for someone else's drinking? Do you feel that if the drinker cared enough about you, he would stop drinking for you? Do you blame the drinker's behavior on his companions? Are your plans frequently upset or canceled, or meals delayed because of the drinker? Do you make threats such as, if you don't stop drinking, I'll tell such and such, or I'll leave you? Do you secretly try to smell the drinker's breath? Are you afraid to upset him for fear it will set off a drinking bout? Have you been hurt or embarrassed by a drinker's behavior? Are holidays and gatherings spoiled because of drinking? Have you considered calling the police for help in fear of abuse? Do you search for hidden alcohol or receipts? Do you ever ride in a car with a driver who has been drinking? Have you refused social invitations out of fear or anxiety? Do you feel like a failure because you can't control the drinking? Do you think that if the drinker stopped drinking, your other problems would be solved? Do you ever threaten to hurt yourself to scare the drinker? Do you feel angry, confused, or depressed most of the time? Do you feel there is no one who understands the problems? Here's how I felt when I first attended Al-Anon. My first meeting, I was listening to the stories, and I said to myself, oh crap, I'm one of you people? Like, yeah, right. By the second week, I was listening to the stories, and I thought, oh crap, I'm one of you people. By the third week, I thought, I'm one of you people. And I felt like I was home. Here's some concrete reasons why I would recommend Al-Anon. The first being, as amazing as my girlfriends are, and they are, I have the best friends in the world. They have listened to a dozen years of my marriage issues, including alcohol issues. None of them are married to alcoholics. And as supportive and prayerful and steadfast and loyal as they have been for me, it wasn't until I walked into that room that I finally felt understood. And I felt not crazy. I realized I wasn't being overdramatic and that I wasn't making these things up, because I was hearing my story repeated back to me from all these other people. That was huge. If that was the only reason I went to Al-Anon, it was good enough. Another reason was their main way of helping you to recover and to cope is to go through the 12 steps yourself, which at first I thought was ridiculous, because I remember thinking, I'm not the one with the problem. But if this is the alcoholic's problems, and here's ours, and they kind of mirror each other and feed off of each other. And going through the 12 steps was an amazing cleansing process for me. The third reason why I would recommend it is I learned ridiculously practical daily tools for living and coping within the constraints of an alcoholic marriage. I learned things like the importance of having a plan B, that at any time my husband might not be able to go to a function or whatever, and so I either had to have another ride lined up, or just even knowing within myself, I'm going to go even if he doesn't go, that kind of thing. Another thing that was huge, that it was okay that I didn't trust him. I felt so guilty for this for so many years. He added to the guilt. But to hear in the rooms that the truth that how can you trust someone who's untrustworthy, who lies to you and who hides things repeatedly, that it would be almost foolish for me to trust him, and that I didn't have to try to muster up the trust anymore, that it was his job to rebuild trust. Not that you can make someone do that, and he never chose to do that, but it was okay that I didn't trust him. That despite what he said to me over the years, that I was not the reason that he drank. He told me that he would drink as a barometer of our relationship. And though, yes, I was a pill to live with, but no one can make anyone do that. Our marriage was hard, and I hesitate to say this, but it was harder on my end than his, and I didn't choose to numb myself to get through it. So I didn't make him do that. You can't cause it, control it, or cure it. So that was so freeing for me to realize that I was not the reason that my husband drank. Also, which this was harder for me to take, but because I was unable to stop it, that all of my ultimatums and my rules and the guilt that I would put on him were not only causing unnecessary pain to him, but they weren't doing any good. My husband has lost his marriage, and his kids, his relationship with both of our children is really tenuous. So he's basically lost his family, and that was not enough for him to stop. He's still drinking. So I need you to get it out of your head that there's going to be some magic phrase that you're going to all of a sudden be able to say to him that's going to get him to stop. He's going to have to want to on his own, and there's nothing you can say or do. It's sad, but it should also be a bit freeing for you and a bit of relief to know that it's not like there's some magic key that you need to get him to stop. Okay, so when I read those questions to you, if any of them, 2, 3 or more resonated with you, then odds are there is an actual problem and it's affecting you. In fact, they say, how do you know when someone has a drinking problem? When it's a problem for someone else in their life. So if it's a problem for you, if you think about it a lot, if you fixate on it, then it's a problem. And though you can't get them to get help, you can get help. So it's probably time, if this sounds familiar to you. I'd highly, highly recommend Al-Anon or Celebrate Recovery. I lean slightly more towards Al-Anon, and I'll tell you why. I've been to both. I tried 2 different Celebrate Recovery groups for several times each. Celebrate Recovery has in its advantage that you're allowed to say more than higher power. You're allowed to say Jesus Christ, and it's everything is based on Scripture. What Al-Anon has to its advantage is that it's specific to those in relationships where alcohol is involved. When I was in Celebrate Recovery, it was strictly set up based on gender. So I was in a group with women who had codependency issues, which I did, so that was fine. But one woman had an eating disorder, and a couple of them had addictions of themselves. So though we could definitely learn from each other, totally different environment from being in a place filled with people who totally get what it means to live with someone with an alcohol addiction. If you want to find a meeting or read more about it, you can go to alanon.org, alanon.org. The next thing I would recommend is to find a sponsor or a mentor who can walk you through the 12 steps. My mentor took me through them. We used the 12-step recovery Bible, and I think we spent like 6 to 9 months or so. She gave me assignments. We would just read the chapter together. She gave me some things to work on, and it was one of the best things. It was just this cleansing, purging season of my life, and it was really, really helpful. Another thing, I've said this before and I'll say it again, get in counseling even if it's by yourself. Tell someone at church that you trust in leadership, but do so with realistic expectations. Not everyone, though they may have seminary training, I've found that not everyone knows how to handle someone who's in a relationship with someone who is addicted. The first time I told someone, though there was empathy, I was given a list of things to do to be a better wife, with the implication that if I did these things, then maybe my husband wouldn't have to drink, if I were better, ... And so clearly that showed that this person didn't understand the complexities. So there's grace for that, but you just need to find someone then who gets it and who can help you. Also, and this one can be really tough if your spouse is also abusive towards you, but that is to pray for your spouse, because no one as a child wishes to grow up and have an addiction. In my more clear moments, I have a lot of compassion for my ex-husband. Being addicted is a painful thing. It's isolating. It's sad. It's lonely. And I feel sorry for him. He didn't, in part, he didn't choose this. And so pray for him. It takes root. It ruins and slowly kills you. And it literally, alcohol, especially long-term, changes your brain chemistry. I've done reading on this, and I've seen pictures of brain scans of people who have been drinking alcohol for years, and it just eats away at the brain. And so for those of us who are in those kinds of relationships, it can kind of help you understand why you might hear yourself say, he's not the same man that I married, and that's really like physiologically the case. If he has some kind of substance abuse issue, it has been changing him. So I'm going to hit on one thing real quick that I didn't write down, and that's as far as your children. If your children are a little bit older, Alateen is available to them, and my kids have gone to that a little bit. And I did tell my children, which is a whole other video, I told my children when they were probably 12 and 14 about their father's drinking, because I felt they needed to be able to be empowered to look for his tells, which are unfortunately very subtle because he doesn't drink in front of us. But I wanted them to know that they could still love and respect him, but that it was within their right to say no, as far as getting in a car with him if he had been drinking. So that's up to you, something to pray about. But there will come times when you're going to have to be really brave and strong and stand up for yourself and for your children and to your spouse. Do not get in a car if he's been drinking. Either take the keys, you drive, ask someone to give you a ride, and don't let your kids get in a car with him either, if at all possible. Unfortunately, in my situation, now that we're divorced, I no longer have a say in that on the weekends that he's got them, and it's something that it haunts me. So please know that you're not alone. Please know that it's totally normal to feel completely nuts in this kind of situation, especially if your alcoholic is hiding the drinking. It's crazy making. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that Jesus sees us, and he sees this, and this is not beyond his reach. I fully believe that he can heal alcoholism. I mean, it's uphill battle for sure. He can heal your husband, but your husband's going to want to have to be healed. So you need to remember that there's nothing you can do. You can pray for him, and you can stay out of his way, and you can do things to get yourself healthy. And I've seen that in my life. I've made changes. Jesus has helped me make changes. So I know for a fact, I can attest to it, that Jesus can definitely heal the effects of living with an alcoholic. So girls, if this sounds like you, please get help. If you have more specific questions that I haven't covered, please feel free to put it on the page, and I will get to them. I know this is a tough road, but you're not alone. Jesus is with you, and there is healing, and there is hope for this too. Okay, thanks, girls.